Welcome to Book Club Babble. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we welcome Susan Weidener, author of two memoirs and a novel based on
A memoir based around.
based on memoir. You have Again in a Heartbeat, a memoir of love, loss, and dating again, Mornington at Wellington Square, and your novel, A Portrait of Love and Honor. So, Suzanne, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the Women's Writing Circle and then how that led to writing of the books.
Okay, well, first off, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this venue to share the joy of writing. And the Women's Writing Circle has been a very gratifying part of my life for the last 9 years. The catalyst was actually a group I attended in the Cincinnati, Ohio area where women sat in a circle and read their stories. And I came back to the Philadelphia area and started the group at the Wellington Square Bookshop, which is in Exton. It's an independent bookstore. And we had 3 women come to the first meeting. And since then, we've had over 300 different women come through the circle in the last 9 years who have basically been looking to find their voice through writing, writing as a way of healing, and also working on the craft of writing and networking with other writers. So that's what we do. And it's really been a catalyst for my own writing because their writing spurred me on to my own work. Again in a Heartbeat, which was my first memoir, came about through these writing circles of writing about the love of my life, his untimely death, and moving on as a single mother and a woman finding renewal and passion. I found these memoir ideas through working with other women writers in a circle. And so I can't even begin to tell you how wonderful it's been to be with writers who are in a supportive, non-judgmental writing group in a sense of camaraderie. So that gives you a little sense of the writing circle. Yeah.
I know that you're always, the people who attend the sessions are always learning from you, but do you find yourself learning from the people in attendance who are sharing very powerful and provocative life stories?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've often said that when they read their stories, I'm amazed at some of how powerful and insightful they are. And sometimes it's the person in the circle that you least suspect who turns out to be the most powerful voice in the circle with her story of vulnerability, and just the way she shares it does a great service to the rest of the group through her story. And so I've learned a lot about vulnerability and writing and everything through the women who come to our special sessions where we meet once a month. And it's really amazing. We just met this past yesterday, and had a great session on talking about creating safe spaces to write and writing off of a writing prompt and things like that.
Actually, can we talk about vulnerability within the context of, and this is an upcoming post thanks to you, and so thanks for writing this piece about vanity in memoir. Of some people saying, is this, all about me? Is this more me search? But yet you're also making yourself very vulnerable. Can you speak to that? Because writers do make themselves incredibly vulnerable. And I don't think that the people who make that criticism get just how vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I agree. It's a great gift when writers can do this, always remembering that their story needs to transcend themselves and reach out to the reader. But yeah, it becomes a question of how much do I reveal about myself? How much do I reveal about others? Should I change names? Should I, change the places? How do I protect myself from possible retribution by family members? Those types of things. And each writer comes to their own conclusion that this is the truth of her story. And this is not your sister's story or your mother's story. This is the truth of your story. And memoir requires being accurate and truthful. That doesn't mean you can't use literary devices in memoir. and use the creative aspects a novelist would use, because we're basically writing a story like a novel.
Well, speaking of, let's talk about one of the themes that you explore, and family myths and memoir. You know, you write in one of your articles, understanding the myths, the legends, and the truth of our stories is at the heart of the writer's task. And by doing so, we lessen the load, not just on ourselves, but others. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel that from all the great writers I've studied and my own experience is that nobody should be presented in black and white terms. I mean, every person is nuanced, and the memoir writer brings to that a sense of, who these people are based on the times, their backstory, everything that involves looking at a person with some empathy so that you're not raging on the page against someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we break the family myths almost as journalists, because I'm a former journalist, you have to stand back and look at the person. And as I said, who are they? What is the context in which they were raised, the times in which they lived? And this is a journey of self-discovery. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough about memoir, that this is a journey of self-discovery, not just of yourselves, but those who most impacted your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that through diaries you have of the journals, photographs, interviewing others who knew them, but you're also going to learn a lot about yourself
Mm-hmm.
in the process. And that's what makes memoir very exciting. At least it did for me.
What do you think? Because I know for me, memoir is my favorite genre. I cannot get enough. And I always, even though it's about someone else, when I read it, it's always about me, because I'm constantly learning. And which is why I'm obsessed with them, because I like to, I'm always learning from that other person. So in a way, that's kind of at conflict with the criticism that it's vanity. I mean, so what is it? I guess, where is that universalness? Because there is a universalness. Even the people that criticize it, obviously they're reading it. Why are they picking it up in the first place? Something draws them to them.
Well, there are major themes that they're pursuing that other people can identify. Childhood abuse, abuse in marriage, being married to someone who's a narcissist, these types of things. In my own case, untimely death and grief at loss. These are universal themes that and they're real stories, which I think, reverberates with people that, people like real stories. They like real lives, real stories. So that's the job, to find that what is my story about is really the key to the memoirist journey. And that takes a lot of digging deep, self-discovery, until you break away and figure out what is it exactly I want to say in this story that transcends me and will also appeal to my audience, who may be going through a similar journey.
Right. I have to say that in a way, memoir has kind of ruined fiction for me, because nothing beats, real life story. What would you say? I know that one of the things that you deal with the most is, and the anxiety and tension is from that fear of putting yourself out there. And whenever someone writing memoir is writing about an incident, family folklore, myth, it's that one perspective that never matches anyone else's. What can you say about that? That your perspective is going to be unique, and no one is ever going to agree on any one perspective of what happened.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because your story, your memory will be different than your sister's memory. Yeah, exactly. This is why you have to find your own voice, adhere to the truth of your story and the honesty of your story, and find the confidence to, tell your story as only you can. And that's really what it is. And try not to be influenced by others who are going to say, this isn't the way I remember it. Be careful who reads your memoir in a beta reading stage, for example. But that's what I say there. I mean, every truth is basically, told twice, it's fiction. But and this is how you remember it, and you adhere to that, and hopefully, you will do the best you can.
Well, speaking of that, you've written that a writer must have a high tolerance for ambiguity, but a need for certainty. What can you tell us about that? Because I thought that was very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, even if you don't remember the exact detail, you are certain of what occurred in that conversation or that event. But the ambiguity can come in with, do you remember all the details, the place? Even if you change the setting, it still happened. It was still a real event. And you're reconstructing from the past as best you can with a sense of certainty that this is the way it was. But we can never go back in time, so we have to try to fit it together as best we can.
Right.
For me personally, a lot of the memories were so vivid, and I also encourage people, and they know certain memories are so vivid, they stand out so clearly, they remember every detail of that particular instance. But yeah, go ahead.
In your own experience as a writer, what, since you've published three books that are very close and near to what happened, once you put it out there, how has the response been from people that say, well, that's not the way I saw it? And how do you deal with the tensions that arise from, once it's on the page? And what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, usually you get something like, oh, you were so honest, which is really code for, that was very brazen, and I probably couldn't have written something like that.
Right.
But other people will say it touched them. This is something that really touched their own lives, and that's the satisfaction and the gratification of memoir writing, is your story touches theirs. And we're all together in this. There's so many similar journeys that we're all together in this. But I think that some memoir writers have to come to terms with these things, that now they've put their lives out there, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Actually, when you just said that, it made me realize, I'm thinking back to your own writing. When I am reading everything that you went through, I'm interested in you and what you're feeling. And to me, that was just so powerful. And I'm not, because I wasn't in that life. But so what I'm thinking as someone, maybe from the perspective of the people that might say you're brazen, what happens to the people close to you that might say, well, Uncle blah, blah surely didn't mean it that way?
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate that my sons have read my stories and felt they felt what I wrote was true.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't have a big family, but I know that some memoir writers have had to deal with some very deep animosity after they published. But I can't speak to that personally. I didn't get any animosity from my sons at all. So, and they read the books sometimes 2-3 years after they'd been out. They didn't read them right away.
Wow.
Yeah, and particularly the one, A Portrait of Love and Honor, which takes their father's memoir and incorporates it into a fictionalized love story. They were very happy with that I took their father's legacy, in essence, and put it out there for others to enjoy. And we've had a great reaction from many at West Point who knew him as a classmate and who have written me and said, this is exactly how it happened, and thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Actually, this is interesting. Has your writing ever inspired your sons to maybe write their own? Have they ever even brought that up? I'm just curious. I've never asked a memoirist that.
Yeah. Now, right now, they're busy working. They're millennials. They're working on their careers and don't have time to write. But one of my sons is a very good writer, and I'm sure he will, maybe someday.
Mm-hmm. When we're talking about the women's writing circle, what do you think holds back most of the women that attend your set? Like, what scares them the most as women that are starting on this path? What do you see? What do you hear?
Yeah, I can only say what I've heard, that basically some of it is very hard work. It's digging deep. And then family obligations enter and life distracts and they don't get back to it. Some I'm sure have also had situations where family members have said, "Why are you doing this?" But I think in the end, it really comes down to a commitment to the story and the distractions of life that get in the way to do this kind of work, which is very soul-searching and deep work.
Mm-hmm. When did you know, especially as a journalist, and I guess I want to ask you that as well, how has your, having been trained as a journalist helped you write memoir? And when did you know you first wanted to write memoir?
Well, actually, the journalism was a great way to learn to remember conversation, capture dialogue, economy of writing, get to the heart of the story, keep it moving. And I knew I wanted to write a memoir. Basically, it's a passionate type thing. One day you realize this is something I need to write. I've longed to tell this story. And so when I entered that circle I mentioned earlier on at Women Writing for a Change, then I knew when I was in that circle, this was a story I had been longing to write. And I didn't write it until 13 years after he'd been gone.
Wow.
So you just know when the time is right, when
Right.
you do this.
So, Suzanne, I know we'd like to have you back because we really appreciate your series. We have so many readers that are interested in the genre and are also writing, and the Women's Writing Circle is takes place in the Philadelphia area or outside of it. But I love that you're contributing to Book Club Babble, because that way women from all over and men can keep in touch. But before we let you go, can you tell us anything you're working on right now?
Yeah, actually, I am working. My next book is as a theme of a woman alone, and I'm actually writing it in first person again, but as fiction. I'll be writing fiction. Yeah.
Okay, so
I like the freedom of fiction, and I think I love memoir, but I'm moving on with this to fiction.
so here's my question. I knew wasn't gonna ask anything, but because there's just something so tempting, like when maybe I got this wrong, but publishers are like, oh, when it's memoir, when it's when this really happened, it's gonna sell more. You don't feel more tempted to say, it wouldn't be easier to go the memoir way versus fiction, since more, since I think for publication purposes, it's juicier?
Well, it could be. Yeah, that's a definite point. But the brand and the things that I've established over the years is really about woman finding her
Okay.
women's stories, and this all kind of coalesces women's stories, fiction, memoir. There's a lot where they overlap too, but basically the stories are about women.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it, and can't wait to have you on again. Thank you so much for being a contributing writer for Book Club Babble.
I appreciate it very much. It's a great site, and I think it's wonderful the way you're featuring so many authors and writers. It's really very inspiring to look at it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And hopefully we could maybe feature a women's writing circle in the future.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you and good night.
Maribel. Good night.